Hello internet and welcome to Sassy Theory, the show where I shove my naked opinions right in your face, so please be gentle. So today we're talking about the historical accuracy of the game called For Honor. So you got some Japs, some Knights, and some Snow Pirates. Who wins? Well, with MatPat's video, he was leaning towards the Japs because money, which I'm not really following because the other two groups are also the elite warrior class of their respective societies. I mean, the exception might be Vikings, but they did more of the freelance kind of thing anyways. Over the years, they had developed extensive trade routes which always allowed them to turn their loot into booty. But I tell you what, you like jerking off to your Japanese animes, right? Go ahead, just check out Vinland Saga. And what do you know, literally like half the series so far is spent on a farm. Matt's assertion that the Vikings come from a frozen hellhole is a little off the mark. If you actually look at a map of average annual temperatures, you'll see that the region is quite similar to the most hospitable parts of Canada. I mean, if they really can't sustain themselves without pillaging, what did they do once it fell out of popularity? I don't see no commercials on the TV saying for just $1 a day I can feed a Dane. Oh, and what else? Vikings don't wear fuck all for armor, do they? You know what I think it is? He's getting Vikings mixed up with cliche barbarians. I mean, the fucking gall of this guy. Apparently they wouldn't take iron armor with them to sea because it might rust a little bit, which obviously falls in line with the everybody is poor except the samurais argument. Well, last I checked, Vikings are about the most pure definition of go-getters, and a little wear and tear is just the price of doing business. Meanwhile, the samurai have just one job, and if something happens to the boss man, they might as well just kill themselves. So you tell me who's truly rich and who's Big Daddy's bitch. But yeah, let's get into my opinions and get the knights involved while we talk about equipment. Now, the knights like to stay on their high horses rather than drag their own metal asses around, and their weaponry reflects that. And yes, I know they didn't always wear full bucket ass plate armor, but you'll see later that that's really not the deciding factor here. But yeah, charging in a battle, a knight would usually have a lance or some kind of polearm at the ready. After all, fighting with a sword on a horse is a good way to lose your horse. But I think we want to assume here that they dismount, for honor. So to make things real simple, we'll give them some kind of polearm and a backup bastard sword and leave it at that. Now for samurai, forget everything you learned in your little Japanese animes. These guys are polearm and archery specialists. Most of this magical katana shit was mostly due to pissing contests that occurred off the battlefield. Now if you really want to hand the Japs the fight, just give them horses, cause they can do mounted archery just like the Mongols. It's literally the medieval version of a helicopter with a door gunner. But fuck that, feet on the ground or turn the fuck around. Also, give them their favorite polearm, the naginata. Now ironically, Japs actually had horns on their helmets while Vikings didn't. But overall, the full suit has so many different parts made out of so many different materials, it's just ridiculous. Vikings' take on armor was to wear layers, which usually involves some chainmail. And he's probably got an axe and a round shield on him. He might have bought a sword for himself if he's been around the block a few times. They'll also sometimes bring some throwing spears along with them. Now when it really comes down to it, the real deciding factor is something that most nerds wouldn't even think about. I mean, the battlefield is pretty high test, but everybody wasn't just walking around like a hulking monster like you see in the game. In reality, you gotta eat right to fight right. Now when it comes to knights, the real issue with all that heavy armor was how quickly it drained their stamina. In medieval Europe, there was a pretty arbitrary divide between what the rich and poor would eat. Meat was the food of noble classes and they ate it almost exclusively. This meant that they'd be going into battle with shit like scurvy and rickets and they'd fade fast, especially in that armor. Now samurai should win this on their skill and versatility, but they've got their own dietary problems. Rice, veggies, and the odd fish is fine for the modern Japanese salaryman, but making anime isn't nearly as demanding as trying to make anime real. I mean, unlike the rest of Japan, samurai think about killing other people in addition to themselves. Truth is, Japan being a really mountainous island, they never really had that much to go around. I mean, even today, just Tokyo has a population bigger than Canada, and food is mad expensive. It's no wonder they developed such a frugality-based culture that had samurai not reaching their potential. I mean shit, 5'3". But Vikings, these guys actually get it right. The reason they aren't the tallest is because their meals growing up aren't that steady and consistent, but really they are the football players of their time. You see, there's two things that really matter for the battlefield, animal fats and carbs, and Vikings get plenty of both. The fat gets converted into testosterone, which is good for muscle mass and aggression, and carbs, especially those high on the glycemic index, are needed to be more explosive in up-close fighting. As an example, powerlifters will eat super high GI foods right before a lift for maximum explosions. Basically, once you burn through your carbs, you'll be swinging like a kitten, and the Vikings are the only one who eat properly to last on the battlefield. And I would hand it to them hands down if it wasn't for the Japs' highly disciplined martial arts. They had developed their own way of fighting, or jutsu, for every range. For example, modern day judo is descended from their unarmed systems called jujutsu. Basically, you'll get tossed and necked if you get anywhere near them. Judo is no joke. I've gone to classes and I'd always leave pretty banged up. I remember this one time I was exhausted at the end of class, but this black belt kept pestering me to go another round, just so he could slam me down a couple more dozen times until my ribs started feeling like a sacrifice to some some pagan earth spirit. I ended up having to do my best impression of a tip turtle until class was over. Another time, I had barely started a match with another black belt and he drives me head first into the floor. It must have been pretty hard because I woke up halfway across the room with the whole class staring at the stupid look on my face. Now that I think about it, there's gotta be something about me that makes people enjoy seeing me in pain. Even when I got called up for move demonstrations, it was just so everyone could watch me get the crash test dummy treatment. So anyways, there was this 6'3" black guy who joined the class for a little while. Let's just call him Donovan. A little background on this guy. He was a poor personal trainer in a big city and he met this rich white girl. And you know, ... now she traffics drugs at the airport. It's easy for her, being rich and all, because she knows the airport people. She brings huge amounts of weed into Canada from elsewhere. You can only imagine the money. The funny thing is, her black wannabe brother told me that damn snitch, he can't even wig her correctly. Or maybe it's just a subconscious resentment, who knows. So anyways, Donovan was fairly new to judo, but he thought that because he was a BBC belt in karate, he could just punch out everybody. One day, we were doing ground game sparring when I hear this guy completely flipping his shit at the black belt he was up against. His reasoning was that because he kept getting his legs swept and landing on his ass, that this was somehow a racial thing. He started screaming that everyone was prejudiced and that nobody knows where he's from, and when the teacher was like, chill, Donna-chan asked if he wanted to get punched out. It would have been a heck of a show, but in the end, I guess he had some respect for judo because he walked. But on his way out, I still got the death glare because he caught me staring with my jaw dropped in pure amazement. Anyways, how can I talk about Vikings without mentioning berserkers? The name actually means that they wear bear pelts, you know, berserkers. My take on that is that it's kind of like a spirit channeling sort of thing, you know, like you're the bear and everybody else is a sissy twink. There's also the wolfies, the Ulfhednar, and the boar guys, the Svinvilkings. But of course, what we really care about is berserk mode, which is quite similar to what we see in a certain manga. You just go into a trance-like rage where you don't feel pain and you're a threat to friend and foe alike. There's many theories on how people accomplish this state, ranging from PTSD episodes to just taking a lot of drugs. One thing that's recorded is that they'll cause themselves pain to get there by doing things like biting on their shields or pulling on their beards. You'll see the same sort of thing at a powerlifting meet where they'll slap each other around to get psyched up. Now as far as drug use, that's totally plausible. Zulu warriors were known to use weed and magic mushrooms to gain a sense of invincibility, which actually I don't think the berserkers cared too much about since their religion glorified dying in battle. But at least with the right drugs in their system, the process will be a lot less painful. As a more modern example, both world wars saw heavy use of alcohol and amphetamines. Sure, liquid courage isn't much of a performance enhancer, but when you're in a bunker getting shelled, who gives a shit? And getting into a firefight on what's basically a heavy dose of Adderall, that'll serve you well. But there's also mention that not everybody can be a berserker. Some people are way more predisposed to the state than others. In modern day, scientists have identified something called the warrior gene, with people who possess it showing extremely aggressive behaviors once provoked. About half of blacks and Asians and about a third of white people possess this mutation, so it makes sense that a minority of Vikings would be standouts in the berserk department. Now before I get to my conclusion, I'd like to reveal the knight's top secret technique to end their opponents rightly. Just twist off your pommel and throw it right in their stupid face. Other than that, yeah, knights were never known to be extraordinary as far as warriors go. It's pretty obvious that they were more about the arms race than they were about refining their skills to the pinnacle, while the Vikings chose a life of opportunistic violence, meaning it was less of a career and more of a lifestyle. And when it comes to samurai, they just focused way more on their training and martial abilities. I mean, in the West, you only got a handful of formalized systems, and there's also HEMA, but that was put together way after the fact. But in the East, you got like a bajillion formalized systems going back hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. But you know the old saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And the Middle Ages sucked so much that just eating properly could be equated to a talent. So basically, the samurai would kick ass with their badass skills at first, but then they get too tired to work hard anymore and the Vikings take it with tenacity. So it's kind of a question of scale. For that matter, what if we did allow horses? Well, fucking horse archers, done deal, right? No. For one thing, Vikings have shields that protect just fine against arrows. Another thing, they're well versed in premeditating ambushes. It wouldn't be too much trouble to them to find a way to negate such an advantage. The knights, on the other hand, had the kind of versatility that when muskets came around, they thought it was a great idea to line up perfectly still and trade fire. So overall, I put Vikings at number 1, samurai at close second, and the knights can just stay inside their trash cans. I jest, but the knights are just soldiers, you know? It doesn't help much that they're so tied in with the pampered nobility class that would rather avoid fighting because they've already got it made. Now you could come back and try and say that it's the same thing with the samurai, but the thing is, they're very consistently well trained by anyone's standards. Keyword consistency, while the Vikings have to consistently win and kill to put food on the table, and then eat it all without being a stingy or a frugal bastard about it. And when they've had their fill, they'll go pork the hottest women they manage to grab to have superior children. Of course, that kind of backfired on them when they eventually bred themselves out of existence. But for real though, why only those 3? Knights and samurai in particular have been the dominant warriors in popular media for many years now. At least they pushed the boundaries a little bit with Vikings, but why not just go nuts? It's more fun that way. And hey, it's not like you gotta reach. It's a big world, and it's not like those three have never met their match elsewhere. You got the Mongols, who out-barbarian the Vikings and were masterclass horse archers. You got the Chinese, who were basically Japs without the island syndrome and wrote the book on this shit. Of course you gotta have the Spartans, fuck, but their equipment is pretty dated compared to the others. Roman legionaries, just throw them in there. The Zulus, who are a little more exposed than others, but downright vicious. The Jaguar warriors of Mesoamerica, kitties got claws. The Indian Rajput warriors with crazy exotic weapons that you're more scared of than your opponent. The Maori with their big man builds and weapons that have a lot of tooth. And going back to China for a second, Shaolin monks, holy shit. Alexander, Attila, Hannibal, even the real life King Ganja had an army worth noting. I could do this all day. Come on, 3? At least let us reskin what you already got so we can have a half-assed historical jerk-off session. And I almost forgot, for you ladies we got the Dahomey Amazons. Yeah, I know they have the advantage of guns, but that way we get more equality. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the video, give it a share. Until next time, this is Sassy saying, eat like a Viking, train like a samurai, and clang like a knight.